There's no magic, there's no mystique. Anybody could do this just simply by saying, my name's Paul Lloyd, I've worked in the IT industry since just before there was one. I get pushback with, we haven't got time for this and we haven't got time for that, in which case, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't got time to have a business. One of the problems is that there's no framework for sales in your typical MSP because they're technical people. They've grown their business through recommendation and referral. The cybersecurity piece will become even more critical than it is, and it will never be solved. There is not enough education for the communities that we serve. In the UK, we have 7,500-ish MSPs, and there's a whole plethora of people who prey on them in terms of expertise. All I'm doing is saying, are you going to get this done by the end of the month? What's going to happen here? And we've driven their performance over 8 weeks from 80% of their very small target to a little over 100%, just simply by focusing on the number.
Paul, welcome to the MSP Insider Show. Please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it.
Okay, so, as you said, my name's Paul Lloyd. I've worked in the IT industry since just before there was one. I actually operated a mainframe when I first left school, and then I got involved in PCs very early on. And during that time, I've done everything from enterprise sales, carrying a bag. I've done SME sales. I've done complex. I've sold transactions. I've sold 1,000 printers, 2,000 printers. And I think, it's just been, I've got such a wide experience. And I think what makes, in many respects, makes me a little bit different is I can contextualize many of the issues that people have. I set out to have as varied a career as I could. What I didn't appreciate was that as the years went by, people wanted you to be a lot narrower than perhaps I was. So, And in terms of what do I do? I mean, I typically work with MSPs, small VARs that have got to the stage that they need a structured sales approach or they need a plan to grow. Mm-hmm. So, for me, it's all about numbers and it's all about doing things deliberately to reach a number. So you don't sit around waiting for something to happen. You're actually out there driving and getting people to move forwards, which is not always easy with the MSPs, particularly because they're all technical. Typically, they're technical people, but they all want to grow in some way, shape, or form. So we put a structure in place to help them to grow and to reach it. And in terms of why do I do it? Unfortunately, I didn't look after my money well enough when I was younger, and therefore I have to earn a living.
Sure.
And it's, it's interesting because so much of what I've done historically obviously still applies today. Mm-hmm. And, some of the techniques that I use for winning enterprise accounts 30 years ago is the approach that I take with MSP contracts with SMEs today. You could never have done it years ago, but today, you can apply the same techniques. And I think that sets it apart from the majority of people who are out there selling sales training and selling largely things that revolve around a transactional sale rather than a complex sale, which for all intents and purposes outsourcing is, which is what we're talking about. We can call it whatever you want, but what we're doing is we're outsourcing IT services from the SME community, aren't we?
Yeah, that's such an important distinction too that I think the industry doesn't talk enough about at all, mostly because it would be like calling out the charlatans and the snake oil salesmen that exist in the space preying on MSPs, but it's ultimately the evolution between the MSP owner and their own business or the sales leader, which is most of the time the MSP owner, mistaking or taking for granted what historically had been labeled as sales for them, which is really all the transactional stuff from the referrals, right? It's not really selling. I usually call it, that's order taking. Don't make many friends by saying that, but then it's like, now we have to transition your business from order taking into professional selling, because what we are doing is selling a complex sale, right? In some instances, to your point, it's very, very similar to running complex enterprise sales because the mechanics of the sale are the same, even if the size of the opportunity is not, or the team doesn't carry the same titles. The fundamental underpinnings of what complex
I mean,
enterprise
the
sales
process
guy.
has to be the same. I mean, if
Right.
you're going to sell outsourcing to an enterprise, you've got to know the people, you've got to get to know them, they've got to get to trust you, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can do all the things that you say you can do. I use a process which I sort of use as a Trojan horse. So to get in there to do something, so low value, low risk, something that we can do for these people that you can prove that you can deliver before you can get as far as the gold prize, really. And unfortunately, because it's SMEs and because they're small businesses, you've just said it, but people don't differentiate between a transactional sale and a complex sale. So, you get lots of telemarketing outfits who are great at doing cold appointments for transactional business.
Right.
But when it comes to a complex sale, which may take 3-6 months, because I won a contract for British Airways, was the kind of the last main thing I did, which was, I'm going back, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, and it was 15 million a year. And it took just as long as I've seen some of the people working on, 15,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, the process is the same. You've got to establish yourself. You've got to build trust. You've got to demonstrate that you can do things. You've got to demonstrate an understanding, and they've got to be able to rely on you. And I often use this sort of comparison with a heart surgeon. But if I was looking for a heart surgeon, I wouldn't go look for a pay-per-click advert on the internet. Now I'd be looking for a reference from somewhere, or looking for somebody that has done it, because it's that important to me. Because if it doesn't work, I've got a problem. And the same thing applies with the small businesses. If the MSP does not support the infrastructure properly, when it's not working, the businesses today in 2025 cannot trade. In which case they could not, potentially they're not here. And if you lay a security on top of that, it's not just losing their business; it could be losing lots more.
Right.
So you've got to build trust. It's a bit twee these days, but know, like, and trust is where it's at.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with some sort of clever, do you want it in red or black, or I'm in your area on Thursday afternoon, would you like to meet at 2 or 4? Those sorts of things are, it's all right if, as I say, if it's boxes and transaction, but not for the sort of things that the MSPs are typically selling.
Every guest gets to answer a question that was left behind from the previous guest. And the question for you comes from Heather Mathis. She is with Start, Grow, Manage here in the States. And her question is, with AI and cybersecurity dominating all of the conversations in the MSP space right now, what do you think is the next significant trend that no one's talking about yet?
Well, that's a nice, easy one, isn't it? I think it's difficult to. It's difficult to answer, really, because we don't know where AI is going, do we?
Yeah.
I think that the cybersecurity piece will become even more critical than it is, and it will never be solved. So it'll just be constantly moving forwards. My frustration with it is that there is not enough education on cyber for the communities that we serve. So nobody is educating them in what's coming, what the issues are, and so on. So I try and get people. I say this so often, and nobody's doing it, which either means that they don't agree with me or they can't be bothered to argue. But to actually do an education event regularly for your clients to say what's going on. These are the breaches that have happened. This is what they could have done to solve them. Just education, not looking to make money, just adding a service. And then, we can perhaps get some way to solving that. But AI, none of us really know where it's going, do we?
Right.
And, I think that it will have an impact on their businesses because the easy things will be done using AI. So, first line support, I genuinely believe will disappear. My controversial view is that it will be done by the vendors, but it doesn't matter who does it. It won't be a human.
Right.
and then there's so many now agents being talked about with AI. So Salesforce have got a building agents to do things that in some respects we probably haven't even thought of yet. But I think from the MSP's point of view is that they need to be on top of it, and they need to be starting to introduce it to their clients, because they're not. I mean, I don't know about your side of the water, but here they're all talking about it. But I mean, I said we had a meeting. I do tech tribe meetings, and we had a meeting last week, and I just said it's a bit like teenage sex. Everybody's talking about it, but nobody's doing it. And it's sad, really, because I use ChatGTP every day, because I've always had an issue with written English. So for me, ChatGTP and Grammarly are gifts from God, and I learn more as I do it, and those are the things that should be being introduced. And when I talk about the MSPs supporting businesses moving forwards, then those are the sorts of things that they need to be introducing to their clients.
Right. That's one of the biggest things that we see on our side of the water as well, is that the industry as a whole is treating this shift like every other shift that came before it. And yet it's fundamentally unlike any shift that came before it, with maybe one exception of the internet. But that wasn't something that you could really sit out for, because in the early stages, like the barrier of entry was still so cost prohibitive, or it just wasn't generally available yet, right? Like you had to wait for the infrastructure. Here, AI is commercially and enterprise available, like with the turn of a click and a credit card, and in some cases no credit card even. And yet the industry seems to be moving from flat-footed to digging their heels in. Like they just won't engage in a way, to your point, learn it, understand it, grow and adopt and adapt, and then also do the same for education for your clients, the ones that are trying to figure out the same problems. Because
my grandson is 6 years old, and the week before Christmas, my son set up a conversation between him and Father Christmas on ChatGTP. So they were going out in the car, and my son turned to my grandson Arthur and said, "Do you want to have a chat with Father Christmas?" And he'd already set it up, and he had an interactive conversation with Father Christmas. And it's kind of trivial in some respects, but it just gives you an indication of the sorts of things that can be done. And if we can do that, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we implementing it and supporting people and moving forwards? And in terms of where we go after that is anybody's guess, isn't it, really, at this stage? So.
The thing that I love that you highlighted was ultimately the experience that was created for the end user, right? I think that's one of the things that, as service businesses, we need to be thinking about the experience more than either the problem or the solution or the outcome. Like we need to bring back a layer or a level of what the experience was like delivering the outcome that, for the last 10 years or so has pretty much been a vacuum in the industry too.
Well, because again, there is a tendency that because the technical staff within the business, I mean, cyber is a perfect example. Everybody sees it as a threat, but the technical people in the business just see technical solutions and are constantly driving for 100%, sort of security based on lots of products and lots of things without any consideration whatsoever for the user. Now, as a user, the worst thing in my life is two-factor authentication. Because I don't want to do that. Now, from a technical standpoint, of course it needs to be done. But I'm a user, and now these days I've got to have a phone with me to be able to log on to anything. And so every time I do that, it irritates me. Now, it can't be just me. I appreciate, again, I've said once or twice about being a generation thing, and I have to recognize that. But from a user's perspective, a lot of these things get in the way of both doing their job and using the stuff. So,
Right.
we have to start to appreciate that and accept in some respects that it's never going to be totally secure, and accept a level of insecurity to make it usable. But techies don't get that.
Yeah.
Have another product. Here's another
Right.
£5 a user per month.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's new and it's shiny and it's cool. Don't you want it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you want it? Because I like it. I've played with it for hours. I
Mhm.
stayed up all night playing with this. So why don't you
Yeah.
want to buy one?
My progression, my story arc, if you will, in MSP, I worked for 5 different MSPs 7 times over 18 years. The first 10 years was on the tech stuff, tech side, right? And then management too. And then I moved over to sales and marketing. And that's really where like I came alive as an individual, but also where I feel like I found my stride and my purpose and the results. So I always love when I get to chop it up about sales, positioning, marketing, conversion, all of those things. Because so many MSPs get it wrong, right? Or like, I mean, the industry as a whole doesn't do it any favors, but nevertheless, we don't have to
I
dive straight
think
into them.
I think a lot of it's down to the fact that they don't necessarily understand what it is that they're actually selling.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a position where, and I mean I say this a lot, but it's an MSP service contract. However you actually want to describe that,
Yeah.
is a complex sale,
Mm-hmm.
and it should be important. So it
Yeah.
should be important to the people that you're selling it to,
Mm-hmm.
because they're giving you the life and beating heart of their business to look
Mm-hmm.
after. Because if you get that wrong, potentially they have no business.
Right.
So that's quite serious. It's a bit
Mm-hmm.
like looking for a heart surgeon, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, you wouldn't go off and go into Google and look for a heart surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, and because there's too many people, and I say the again, I'm not going to say anything that I haven't said 1,000 times almost, but
Sure.
in the UK we have 7,500 ish MSPs,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a whole plethora of people who prey on them
Yeah.
in terms of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
There's marketing, there's lead gen, there's technical, there's software, and all these things. And typically they're naive, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. They're
Yeah.
naive technical people who, in some cases, have got a business that they don't even know how or why. They just
Mm-hmm.
happen to have added people and won a few customers along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's very few people that actually have grown beyond. I mean, in our case, £1 million, so $1.5 million.
Sure. Right.
But they're all experts.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of sell their £1.5 million MSP, and they suddenly become growth experts.
Yeah.
And now they're charging phenomenal sums of money to tell people how to grow their business when they couldn't do their own
Mm-hmm.
beyond that sort of level.
Yeah.
And I just find it incredibly frustrating, because I come the other way in some respects. I come from sort of bigger channel partners selling enterprise outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I fully understand the process and the kind of the methodology to do it and what needs to be in place.
Right.
But you've got all these little, these little companies and these
Mm-hmm.
small people, and it just frustrates me when you get, you go into places and you work with them, and there's so much potential, but there's a mindset shift,
Right.
to become, many of them don't want to be. They want to grow, but they don't want to be a sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sales in the UK is different to the States in that, sales in the UK is the job you get when you can't get a proper job. Whereas,
Okay.
in the US, top salespeople are the kings, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And so they all want to grow, they want to get bigger, but they don't want to be too salesy.
Yeah.
And, you talk to them about numbers, and you may as well be talking a different language.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally, I mean, I've got one at the moment I'm working with, and I attend his sales meeting once a week. I've done
Mm-hmm.
this for 8 weeks. And I attend his sales meeting. He's got a salesman, sales manager, and himself. Between the three of them, they do enough. If I was running the business, I'd want 3 times as much as they want to do between them, which is it's their business, is their money. But all I'm doing is saying, are you going to get this done by the end of the month? What's going to happen here? And we've driven their performance over 8 weeks from 80% of their very small target to a little over 100%.
Yeah.
Just simply by focusing on the number. Nothing more than that. There's no magic, there's no mystique. Anybody could do this, but just simply by saying your target's 100. Where are you? You're only on 85. What are you going to do about the 15? Oh, well, we can't do anything. No, there must be something. So what can we do? What are we doing about next month? Let's start looking at next month and the month after now. And as I say, from the last week of January to the end of end of March, they've gone from doing 85% of their quota, and in March they did 102.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right.
And, and because what happens then is, because it's not exactly rocket science, they go, well, we can do that. But the issue is it's execution, and it's just simply the focus. That's all I've ever done. All I've ever done is work with salespeople and a number. Yeah. And I had 70 enterprise salespeople working for me at one point. And the same thing's the same. Your job is delivering a number. And the company has to start thinking about that number. Right. What are they going to do to help you get to that number? And no excuses.
Right. Yeah. The other fallacy that I find also in that scenario, when you start to get to production, right? When the sales reps are actually producing, and even if they're under quota, because you set the quota too high, like from an owner standpoint that doesn't get it, is thinking through and building for the reality where operations is built out in such a way that it can sustain the growth that was sort of demanded. I worked through and lived through that experience on both sides of the house once, and that's equally as damaging and certainly not as pretty. And almost it's a bit of the Peter principle playing itself out, right? Because you have the accidental business owner, the MSP owner, who arbitrarily picked the line in the sand, which was the growth goal. Maybe somehow you actually ended up with good sales folks that were able to perform, but when you get there, none of the rest of the business is built for the growth that dogpiled on.
And I work for what is now a very wealthy man, directly for a number of years, and one of his ethoses was that the infrastructure was always around about 18 months behind sales. Yeah. So I sometimes, I do a fair amount of talking at conferences and things, and occasionally you just say, write the brochure, go out and sell it, and then put the thing in place. Don't go and spend a fortune putting everything in place and then going out and selling it. Yeah. And and it's great if people can do that behind. Obviously they have to keep up with you, but of course in the smaller environments, they haven't ever really done a plan with a number that they want to achieve. Right. So I tend to work on the basis of 100% growth over 3 years. So and it's that's actually relatively simple, but I can work the numbers out relatively easily, and it doesn't matter whether at the end of the first year you change the numbers, but what you have is you've got something set, so you've got to grow at 23% a year. Yeah. So what does that mean from a revenue perspective, and what does that mean in terms of the numbers of seats, whatever your measure is, the number of seats? How many seats do you need to be able to do that? Now, that's not. I can do that calculation in 15 minutes with most of them, and then it's if that's the case, and we need to add them, we can't sell 5-man band because we can't get enough fives. So we got a choice: do we have 450s, or do we have 200s, or whatever it is, 825s? Right. So now we know what we've got to do. So who are they? And let's write a list of them, and let's go and sell them something. And it genuinely is not any more complicated than that. But you've got to do it.
Yeah.
And
That's so
that's,
important.
and that's the bit. And, I've got
Yeah.
£2 million clients who, when you actually break it down and you look at who do you want to sell to, how big are they, how many seats have they got,
Mm-hmm.
they only need 4 or 5 new clients a year,
Right.
to be able to generate and then double their business in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, they don't need masses and masses of marketing. They
Yeah.
don't need tens of thousands of pounds of SEO or any of that stuff. I mean, really, they just need to identify a list of 100 companies of that sort of size
Mm-hmm.
and then go and talk to them.
Yeah.
It's different when they get to 3 and 4 and 5 million, because the growth number becomes so large.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got to be doing something different. But initially, I mean, I had a spat on LinkedIn with somebody recently around, because I think most of what I do is sales, sort of sales prospecting as opposed to marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So, my whole background comes from from a sales background with,
Yeah.
salespeople. And a long time ago, I came out and bag and all the rest of it. But I'm very much, identify what you want to do, look at who you want to do it, and then just go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, we can't do that. We need to spend. I was speaking to somebody the other day who's spending £2,000 a month. What's that? $3,000 on PPC.
Mm-hmm.
And you just, why?
Yeah.
You know, you can do.
Yeah.
You can build a list.
Mm-hmm.
You can identify people. You can then email them, contact them on LinkedIn, go to networking events where they are, just
Yeah.
be there where they are. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you want? You want five of them to start dealing with you this year. But they don't get it.
Yeah. I think the spirit or the essence and the core of what you're describing as well is really deeply rooted in the clarity that
Mm.
you're bringing, and then the most important part you mentioned, which is the execution, right? And what you're bringing is the accountability to the execution. But if you've identified the right things to do to achieve the goal, and then you ensure that you're doing them, then the goal is the byproduct of
Mm.
the inputs, which is really sort of like the revelation that I had when I was transitioning as well to building and growing sales teams, or being just an individual salesperson after being on the tech side, was if you could bring the clarity of troubleshooting sales as a process and like a journey or an evolution, a psychological journey, especially on the buyer side, then also bring the troubleshooting brain of the analytics, right? Well, if that's the goal, it's going to take me, to your point, I can split it up however I want. It's either 100 like this or 5 like this. Then you do have the clarity and you just have to go do it. And you have to go do the right things to move the ball forward. But it is quite simple. It's maybe not easy for everybody, but it is so simple because it's black and white. Which is why I stayed on the growth side forever after 8 years afterwards, was because one, I enjoyed working with salespeople so much more because they were objective and tied around a number. Like, it was very black and white. This is the goal. Where are you at? How can I help you? How can I support you? What do you need? Or what aren't you doing to produce the outcome? But there was no ambiguity around any of it. It was purely execution, with some evolution, some training, some growth, some
I think
coaching.
so. I think the other thing that I find is too many. You know, everybody can sell. I mean, if you talk to anybody in the world, they can all sell. They've all sold something at
Yeah.
some time or other. But doing it deliberately and to a
Mm.
number is a
Mm-hmm.
completely different environment.
Yeah.
And you've got to be in a position of giving these, the salespeople that are working for you all the tools that they need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And right down to something as simple as clarity of what it is that they're selling.
Mm.
What are the services that you offer? What does that actually include? Who do you sell them to? Who can they reference? Where are your case studies? And all those things, so that they've got the tools when they're they're sitting in front of somebody, or
Mm-hmm.
doing it like this, that they've got reference.
Yeah.
But all too often, it's there's a desk, there's a chair, you've got a laptop, you've got access to Google. Now go away and bring me some business.
Yeah.
Of course, 3 or 4 months later, they haven't. And
Mhm.
then, they end up sacking them and doing something else or firing
Yeah.
them. And you just sort of, well, have you done this? No, but they should know that. Well, how?
Mhm.
Just because they've worked at a similar organization doesn't mean that they know what your services are or where they fit or the size of companies that you want to sell to
Right.
and what your sales story is. Why should somebody buy from you? And all those things that they've all got to be put together to create
Mhm.
the environment within which the people can be successful. And they do it
Yeah.
for technical staff.
Yeah.
They've got their ConnectWises or their auto tasks and their
Mhm.
RMMs and ticket this and whatever.
Yeah. This
They've
is how
got
you
all
do
of
it.
that stuff for them.
Mhm.
But then they're paying the salespeople, I mean, generally speaking, more money
Mhm.
and sitting them down with nothing and then
Right.
wondering why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. One thing I found, it really kind of goes to the point of what you just said, is it seemed as though most MSP owners tended to feel as though the problem was solved when the decision was made. So, in the decision being, in this case, hiring somebody, the sales rep, rather than the problem is solved once they've solved the problem, which is like solving through the decision to bring your salesperson in. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to sell? Who can't they sell to? What can't they sell? What is the price? Like, all of it, to your point. What are the stories? What are all of those things you mentioned? And it seemed like that was also then the reality as a result of, sales is the area of the business that they have the least amount of understanding about. And so that's why I think the decision to bring in the salesperson is just like, okay, the sales is solved. They'll go bring in the number, but you haven't equipped them at all. And there's
yeah,
no
and they
system for them
also
to run.
they will absolve themselves of any responsibility to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've taken on Mr. Salesman, so he'll do it now. I'll just
Yeah.
leave him to it,
Right.
And then
Mm-hmm.
when it doesn't happen, because they haven't checked in and because they haven't regularly reviewed and held people accountable,
Mm-hmm.
then it's all their fault. I
Right.
mean, I worked for an organisation once where I was the 276th member of the sales team in 5 years, and they'd
Wow.
never had more than 6 at any one time.
Wow.
But the MD says it's the salespeople's fault because they're all rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, have you ever actually looked at yourself? Have you ever
Right.
actually sat down and, and it was a turnaround, so I could get away with more things
Sure.
than you would if you were a proper employee. But you
Yeah.
just sort of, you just say, look, this is what you're doing. You're bringing people in. You're not giving them any guidance. You're not giving them any sort of steer. You're just
Mm-hmm.
expecting them to come in, sit down, and get on with it.
Yeah.
And the percentage of people who can do that is very, very small,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't work for your average small MSP. They're
Right.
going to go and work for Salesforce or
Mm-hmm.
Oracle or somebody who pays them
Yeah.
massive bucks and
Right.
when it's a bit easier to do the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where most of it's prescribed already anyway, too, right? Or sell something that's expensive, so that's where the money is. Tell me about the moment that you realized traditional MSP practices were kind of what was actively holding them back.
I think I mean, I've worked in the industry
Mm-hmm.
for 30 years, and as I've said, really, my kind of carrying my own bag piece was enterprise.
Sure.
So at the time, I'm going back a long way, but I mean, at the time, it was all manual, and and you work with enterprises. And when I started, I was given 12 target accounts. So there's 12 companies. Your job is to go and sell to them,
Mm-hmm.
not 13, not 14, these 12. And to do that, of course, you'd have to do research. You'd have to find out what they did and where they were, and you'd speak to the vendors and find out what they were up to, and then sort of craft a story to be able to at least get to be able to talk to them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I've done sort of sales management, and I've been the sort of a senior director a number of times along the way. And then I got a little bit more involved with the MSP space 6-7 years ago. And initially, I suppose I couldn't quite understand why it never worked. Now, having said that, in the ones where they've got, if they're lucky enough to have had somebody of experience who helped found it, or
Sure.
they were lucky enough to find the sales director on their
Hmm.
first time, and they got the right one first time, which is it's a bit like finding a needle in a haystack.
Right.
Then typically they do quite well. But when you actually then look at it, and then you sort of what made the people that I worked with previously successful, and it was actually analysing that, because a lot of the time you gain experience without necessarily questioning what that experience is about, because it works with you, you work with it, time goes on.
Hmm.
And then it occurred to me that one of the problems is that there's no framework for sales in your typical MSP, because they're
Right.
technical people.
Hmm.
They've grown their business through recommendation and referral.
Hmm.
Recommendation and referral tops out. Now in the UK, it tops out at typically 900 £1 million a year,
Okay.
900,000. If they're a partnership, it goes to about 1.4, 1.5 million.
Mm.
And then it plateaus, because at that point,
Yeah, you've
your
exhausted.
recommendations and your loss of client
Mm.
balance each other out.
Yep.
And I would say more than 90% of the companies don't get beyond that.
Hmm.
And that's where a lot of the VCs have picked them up, is at that point where they they can't sort of grow any further.
Yeah.
But then what I found was that there's a lot of them are kind of mid-40s, early 50s. They've been doing it for 15, 20 years, and the pattern is identical. I
Mm.
talk to them and I can tell them more about their business than they know themselves from the outside, because the pattern is identical. So you look
Yeah.
at it, and and I sort of put together this template, I guess, of 10 things that you need to get into place. So if you want to be successful and build a
Hmm.
successful sales environment, there's 10 things that we need to do. And it was then that you start to realize that there's a mindset shift,
Yeah.
first and foremost. Some of them will never do it anyway. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I tend to just say, look, make best of what you've got.
Yeah.
Um, but, if you can get the mindset shift and you can get all the things in place,
Hmm.
you give them a framework to be able to manage people, and they will come out of it. And I'm speaking at MSP Global back end of the year, and it's all about going beyond the founder. So
Mm.
the founder gets you to the 900,000 £1 million, but
Yeah.
then we have to do different, and it's selling deliberately, largely. We've got
Hmm.
to go out and sell things on purpose and not wait for things to come to us.
Yeah.
Whether it's SEO or whether it's pay per click, or your mate down the road who knows somebody who knows somebody who needs somebody, type of thing.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's then kind of providing that experience as much as anything else, but to be able to create that so that salespeople and even them themselves have got a better chance of
Hmm.
going out and winning some business on purpose.
Yeah.
I want to do 2 million this year. I've got to win 5 new clients. What does that mean? So for me, you need a robust sales process, because
Yeah.
you need to be able to drive things through it and understand where they are.
Hmm.
I've got a client at the moment which I've been trying to speak to today, because he's got a prospect, and I listened to. I mean, it's this guy with the sales that I sit in on the sales meetings, and I sat in on the Monday, and they were describing this inquiry that they had, which is absolute bullseye in terms of where they want to be.
Sure.
But there's so much that they haven't asked that they don't know,
Mm.
and they want to do a proposal now.
Right.
And I was sitting thinking, I've got to intervene,
Hmm.
but I've got to do it without kind of dispiriting or looking like I know better, because even
Hmm.
with the best one in the world, there's no guarantee that you're going to win it.
Yeah, because you still
Um,
have to take the buyer through the journey that they need to go through, right? To
yeah.
be able to have the realization, the epiphany, or the emotional transition to commit to making the
Mm.
decision, which makes me wonder too, like, was there, or what was the emotional trigger that pushed you to really want to challenge the status quo of the industry? Was it the frustration with the lack of understanding about like customers' needs, or was it seeing MSPs truly avoiding the grind of
I
sales
think some
despite
of it,
wanting to grow?
from my point of view, I guess, you know, I've had a reasonably better than average successful career, and you
Sure.
reach a point where I never wanted to build a company. I've never wanted to do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with other people,
Yeah.
and I find myself at the at the end of it, I guess, in some respects. And then you look, and I got more and more involved with the MSPs just by being around them.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds very twee in some respects, but I genuinely want to help them. Now, equally, I want to get paid, I guess. But fundamentally, there's so many people ripping them off.
Yeah.
And I look at it, and I got a client who I saved £20,000 kind of early last year and the back end of the year before, just by taking out telemarketing that wasn't working, and the email shot that somebody else was charging him £1,000 a month that wasn't working, and all these things which they don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes up with a shiny silver thing and says,
Yeah.
you do this and you're going to have oceans of business in 3 months, it's a nonsense. But they don't know any better.
Right.
And I mean that, again, I mean it in the nicest possible way. And why would they? Because they haven't, so many of the, the MSP owners are technical. They haven't been through that kind of growing curve. So it's an ideal market for me as an individual. I mean, I do work with some bigger companies, but the problem with bigger companies is they've typically got a sales director or they've got somebody, and then you end up in an ego competition. And what they don't understand is that I don't want their job, and so you've got to be able to then manage that, which is quite difficult from the outside, in fairness.
Sure.
And so I work with, generally speaking, the ones that are just about to make the move to kind of do legitimate sales, or more recently, they've got a couple of salespeople and they're not performing, or they're not going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes it's the salesperson. They're not right. More often than not, they just don't have the tools to be able to go out and do the job. So I then act as an interpreter between sales and technical, and sort of to help them get everything in place and do the job properly.
Yeah. What is it that's at the core of your approach to reimagining their sales process, or any component of it?
I sort of, well, as I say, I've got these sort of 10 points. The first one is, who is it that you actually want to sell to? Because you've got to know that. And what is it you're actually selling? And that, that really is an exercise that sometimes is quite difficult, because they don't really know. Again, it's a service, but what does that mean? What is the person buying? And getting that sorted, and then what you're then doing is you're building your sales story. Why should they deal from you? And having a decent process, and then just putting some straightforward prospecting sort of tactics in place, whether that's emails or LinkedIn or just, God forbid, the telephone.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it, the end users, the people that we're selling to, are crying out for help in most cases. So, if you can, I'm a big fan of vertical markets, or niches for you, aren't they? I tend to refer to it as a target market, because that's what I've always done. But that narrowing things down so that you can talk with authority in that particular industry or geography or whatever it happens to be. And even that is quite hard to sell sometimes, because they see it as reducing their opportunity rather than becoming better in a smaller pond.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's something that I'm always going, because I know that the ones who have done that are growing quicker than the ones who haven't.
Right.
And that the statistics to prove it. And we've got some great examples of where an average MSP, one is a vet, where they've focused on vets.
Yeah.
And their website's got furry animals all over it, and that's what they do. They understand everything, all the technology, everything they do within the vet. And the guy who owns it actually gets asked to go to veterinary conferences to speak to vets about using technology.
Yeah.
Well, when you've done that, you've cracked it, haven't you? Because now anybody who's looking, any vet, I mean, presupposing there's enough vets, but
Right.
anybody who from a vet who's been to a conference who's seen him speak, you're going to ask them before they talk to anybody else. And then you're going to get some sort of generalist trying to sell them security and all these things without really understanding where it fits in the terminology against somebody who can speak to them in their own language, understands what they do. And we've got a young chap started 4 years ago who concentrated on recruitment agents 2 years ago. So he did kind of general for 2 years, which I think is the way to go, is that when you start, unless you've got a particular area of specialism yourself.
Right.
I mean, I had a client once whose specialism was post-production video, because that had been his full-time job.
Sure.
So, that's the way he took his business. But there's a chap who, 2 years he went everywhere. Then he got an affinity with recruitment agents. And he's pursued the recruitment agents to the point where 3 months ago he changed the name of his business to include recruitment in the title of the business.
Yeah.
So he knows all of the software that they use in the recruitment business. He spent time in recruiters, so he understands the issues that the people have. So he speaks their language, and he's taking on 3 and 4 new clients a month. In fact, he stopped taking on new clients because he couldn't. He's got the issue that you mentioned in that at the moment he can't backfill the requirements for the service fast enough with the new clients that are coming on board. Now, he's only doing that because he knows that he's got an affinity with the market. Everything he does is focused on the recruitment market. So, there's 8,500 recruiters in the country. So, he's got a massive market to shoot at. Right. And that is very much, for me, that's the future for MSPs. That their future is delivering technology to take their clients forwards. It's not resetting passwords and all the the sort of the standard tier one.
Yeah, it's really all the commodity part.
Because
anyway,
I genuinely believe that the vendors will offer that frontline support themselves via AI. Yeah. Because they'll be able, Microsoft will be able to do it on such a scale that the first line technical, issues and things they will be able to cover with AI across the whole of their user base, however big it is. So, the MSPs themselves then have a problem. Well, they have to evolve, whereas at the moment, a lot of them are doing, I've been involved, I suppose, 6 years more or less full time, but 2 or 3 years before that. And there's not many of them doing anything different to they were. They're just going along the same way. They're doing the same support calls. They're doing all those sorts of things. And, artificial intelligence is going to take that away. In the same way as the internet took away the requirements for yellow pages and Thomson directories and those sorts of things. But so for me, they need to understand the business to be able to start to deliver and help their clients become more efficient and and improve their business, genuinely improve their businesses, rather than being kind of a reactive, sitting back, waiting to be asked lots of questions.
Yeah. On that point too, why do you think, or what have you seen, why do most MSPs continue to fail at those basic things like understanding their clients' needs or
because they're not. They're technical. A lot of them are introvert techies, aren't they? And there's as many that you talk to that are happy if their clients don't speak to them. I mean, on the basis that if they're not speaking to me, there can't be anything wrong. Rather than go out and genuinely get involved. But there are the various methodologies and whatever. But I think my message all the time is be out in front of your clients. Go and spend some time in their business.
It's so huge.
Understand what your client's business is, because if you know that, then you can do more. I mean, I got a client who they spent a couple of days in the accounts department of one of their larger clients, and they literally just sat in the accounts department watching all the people working. And what they discovered was there was 8 or 9 people all working on individual spreadsheets. So, they went away and, for not a lot of money, they built within Microsoft, whatever, they built a sort of spreadsheet that they could all update at the same time. So suddenly they've gone from lots of individual things which somebody has to amalgamate to all working on the same thing and saving hours.
Right.
And that, to me, is a perfect example of what they should be doing all of the time. The people who will move forwards are the ones that can say, you need to do this. I can make this quicker, sharper, faster. We can help you win more clients or whatever it happens to be. Not, we'll support your desktops, because there ain't going to be any support on desktops, is there?
No, it will evolve past that. In a lot of ways it already is and has. Why? Well, not why. MSPs are notoriously resistant to change. What's the biggest obstacle that they face when they attempt to modernize their processes? Excuse me.
I think some of it is just they're unsure, aren't they? They've got to where they're at.
Yeah.
So the pattern follows that. There's a lot that in the UK that started sort of 2000, 2005 because they got made redundant after the millennium. And, when the world didn't end, then, so they then started doing a bit of support, and then they found some, they got a few customers, and then they got 5 or 6 customers, and then they had their junior engineer, and then they had another junior engineer, and they've got a business now that is potentially doing £700,000 or £800,000 a year, 4 or 5 engineers and an office junior. And, they don't really know why they got there or how they got there. But to then change that is a massive ask because they're comfortable with it, aren't they? And a lot of them, you have to accept that, many of them are lifestyle businesses. I had somebody once paying me to have a telemarketer make appointments for him, but then he'd get his office girl to try and rearrange them the day before because he wanted to go to the gym.
Right.
So, you spend hours getting people, you call in and whatever, and you get your first time appointment, and he's got somebody phoning up to try and rearrange it because he's just decided he wants to go to the gym tomorrow. And, so that's, there's an education process in that. But they've got to want to do it, haven't they? Really. And,
absolutely.
And they get to where they're at. But, as I say, the guy I worked for a long time myself, I mean, he went from, well, I don't know, his group's worth about 4 billion now, but he was never satisfied. And he would, he's 80 years old these days and he still works 10 or 12 hours a day. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody should be doing that, but at the same time, if you want to grow your business and you want to be successful and profit, you have to work. There's no shortcut to it, is there?
No. Ben Horowitz talks about that, where he says there's no such thing as silver bullets, right? There's only lead bullets, and you have to continue to fire. What opportunities are these MSPs overlooking specifically related to like aligning to client goals? Because I think you're really over the target there with where they need to be.
I just think they're missing the opportunity to get involved and make more margin and more services from being a trusted advisor, I guess. I mean, trusted advisor is the kind of saying that we've had for 100 years, isn't it? But they're stopping short of being a business consultant, and I think they need to be careful there. But there's so many opportunities for all of the SME type businesses to improve, not with massive investment, but it might be. It might be a significant investment, and if you can work with your client. And, you make your money, you make your margin, you help them improve, they do better, they take on more, they want more, then that has to be the way forward. If you sit back and just, answer the password questions and, when there's a paper jam or whatever it happens to be and you don't want to talk to them any other time, apart from, one of the other bugbears I think today is in the cybersecurity world is that every month we go back and ask them for a different product, don't we?
Yeah.
So, we go back and we go, and then, there's this resistance. I don't understand why they don't want it. You go, well, last month you told them that it was this, and this month it's another one, and next month it'll be another one. Rather than taking a more kind of holistic view of it.
Yeah.
But, I think there's a reticence to do that. But I think, the payback for that is exponential in comparison to what some of them are getting as it stands at the moment.
Yeah. What is the one habit that you successfully install in the MSPs that you consult with or work with that has completely transformed their results?
I think to some extent it's no more complicated than a number. I mean, and I said that at the beginning.
Sure.
I mean, I'm clearly in many respects from a different generation, but I have a thing about whiteboards.
Yeah.
And, and I get in all sorts of arguments over whiteboards because as far as I'm concerned, you have a whiteboard on the wall and you write the numbers on it, not a screen, because I just don't, there's so many fancy screens around these things and nobody's telling me they look at them. But if you've got a whiteboard and you've got the numbers for this month on and, somebody's responsible for it, and then everybody can get involved, everybody walking past can see where you're at, they can see what numbers you require, they can see what deals you've got on, and they can actually work with it. And that will add 15-20% to your numbers. And, and I say, for the sake of, $30, it's probably not even that much these days.
Sure.
20 quid for a whiteboard. It's bringing the numbers out and making them visible. And, even CRM systems, I'm an advocate of CRM and everything should be in your CRM, but at some point you need to pull it out, pull the numbers out of that so you can see them. All too often it's, we can do this and it's there. And this client that I'm doing this sales meeting, we've increased his business, his margin by 15% for all intents and purpose over the course of 7 or 8 weeks, just simply concentrating on the number.
Yeah.
This is where you need to be. How are we going to get there? And, we're short of this and we haven't got this and we've got this project that, so let's go around and look for all the projects that need invoicing. Let's get invoiced everything we need.
Right.
And, the guy who owns the business has said that the two, the salesman and the guy in the meeting, they've started to ask that question internally. What are we going to get done? And and that change of let's just wait and see what happens to let's do this.
Yeah.
At the moment, as I say, has increased their business by 15%.
Right.
And
that default
all the
action.
time, that's what it is. And my old boss at 12 o'clock every day, and when I was there, he employed 1,000 people and he'd got half a dozen businesses. He knew what the invoice business was for that business at that point in time. He knew the cash position. He knew what work there was in progress and what his debtors' days were at 12 o'clock every day. And, I stand up in front of these audiences at these conferences and I go, tell me what your invoice number is. And there's nobody generally in the audience who can tell me at any given time what their invoices numbers are, or or what their debtor is, or because these things just pass them by. But if you've people respect what you inspect, don't they?
They do.
And if you've got that at the forefront, then you've got to be a special kind of person to be able to ignore it, haven't you?
I definitely agree with making it analog. So a whiteboard with a number on it is incredibly powerful. Is there one metric that you would say is the best indicator of success once you've established the number?
I think you've got your target, whatever the numbers are. So, if in the case of the one that I was talking about, 2 million revenue, he wants to grow to 4 over 3 years. So he's got to add 350-ish K.
Yeah.
So, he knows what that is. That's one. And then you've got your deals that you're going to close this month. The big issue then is, do you actually sort of use the revenue number or the margin number as your measure. And I personally would use both, but all too often people want to use margin, which, or profit. And I understand that. But as you get a little bit bigger, what they have to understand is that the vendors see them on the basis of their revenue. Because if I'm selling to a channel partner, then I'm not interested in how much profit they make. I'm interested in how much product they buy.
Right.
So, if we're using the revenue number as the measure, when we're talking to vendors in terms of, it could be marketing or just getting vendors on board, the size of your business in the overall sense is more important than how much profit you make. But obviously internally, it's about profit. But, those are the numbers that you need there. And then, if you've got 2 or 3 salespeople, you can split it up. But make them responsible. I mean, it's a little bit more difficult if you don't work in an office, I guess, but to actually keep it up to date.
Right.
And then as people come in, they can see it. And then they'll ask questions. Technical people, if they're going out to see a specific client and there's a deal on the board that they're expecting to close this month, then they haven't got to get involved, but they could just bring it up in conversation, can't they?
Right.
And everybody can get involved because everybody can see it. But all too often, because there's not enough of it, or because it's not going so well, they don't want it public in that respect. For the very same reasons that you want it public, because then it grows. I mean,
that was one of the very, very first changes I made when I joined the sales team as just an individual contributor from the tech side, was building my own stack ranking board, right, for me and my peers. I wasn't even in the leadership role at the time, but we needed to do it for the same reason you've already articulated, right? The goal was, we were 30% a goal with like 4 months left in the year to do it. And how it even got to that point, who knows, right? But it did. So that was the reality. Like, okay, well, here's the goal. Here's our delta. And here are the opportunities that exist. And here's the stack ranking for where everyone is. Well, now you have some clarity and some peer accountability to who's doing what and who's contributing where. And is it uncomfortable? Sure. But you know what else it did? It drove the goal and we exceeded it, right? In 4 months, we got to 108% of goal when they spent 8 months or whatever it was at 30% of production. And it was as simple as clarity, visibility, awareness, and accountability. And then to your other point, orienting all of the actions on the team toward being able to cross that number off, right, at the top. It didn't have to get any more complicated than that.
Well, no, and you get, there's a focus then on doing things in your everyday work that move the number and that don't make you feel good.
Right.
I mean, one of the challenges I work on my own, principally in this room, which is 3 meters by 2 meters. And it's very easy to be busy all day, but not achieve anything. And certainly, these days we've all got access to the various social media and screens and all the rest of it. And you can go down a rabbit hole at 9 o'clock in the morning and not surface till lunchtime.
Right.
But if you've got this number in front of you and you can see what you need to be doing, it sort of grounds you back, doesn't it, all the time? Because what are you doing to this? Well, I've spoken to them. Well, yeah, but that's fine. So you've done that, but how are we going to get here? It's a week before the end of the month. You've got 3 deals that you said you're going to close. What are you doing in the next 4 days to make that happen?
Right.
Not necessarily in a kind of a disciplinary way or a hard way, but how can we help you do it? Because, whenever I've taken anybody on, salespeople particularly, but anybody, I just think the company is 50% responsible for making you successful. Yeah. So you bring 50% and we'll bring 50%, and then hopefully we're successful. And and in doing that, you want to know what's going on. You want to be able to support the issues. You want to know where you're at all the time. And I'm not suggesting it's kind of a constant review. I mean, I used to get in my car, and I still do now, but you get in your car and I'd phone the various salespeople who work for me from the car just to say, how are things? And you
Mhm.
know what their diaries are. So how did your meeting go this morning? You know, what happened with this, or how are things
Right.
with that? And so you're constantly in touch with what's going on.
Mhm.
And you don't necessarily need to get involved, but they know you're there.
Right.
And the positives are they know you're there and that you're interested and you're involved. But equally, they know
Mhm.
you're there, and that
Yeah.
is quite difficult to constantly say, "I haven't done anything," isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean, today, if I phoned you and said, "How are things going?" Have you? Well, I haven't managed to get anything done today. It's not a problem, is it?
Right.
Tomorrow, you could go, but 3 days on the trot. No,
Mhm.
you're not gonna want to say that. So, again, it's just that kind of accountability for everybody. And if you say you're going to do something, so if I said I manage the sales guy for an MSP, and I do it from the outside, so I only tend to, manage the numbers and just keep a focus really.
Mhm.
And this guy I used to phone or at 12 o'clock every Friday lunchtime, not 5 past, not
Mhm.
5 to 12 o'clock, wherever I was. So, if I was out, I'd stop. If I
Yeah.
couldn't do it for whatever reason, I'd tell him the day before. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't, let it go beyond. And every day at 12 or every Friday at 12 o'clock, we'd have a conversation. How have you gone this week? What have we moved forwards? What have we added to the pipeline? Um, and he's got the answers. The phone call takes 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If he wants to talk about things that haven't happened or issues or what can we do about it, that's a separate call that we can have a bit longer at some other time. But just having that tight 10 minutes, what have we done? Where are we at? What's going on? What's not happening that we thought would? And what's been added? At the time I said, it works and it
Mhm.
works well. If I'd have phoned him at 10 past 12 some weeks and half past 12 other weeks and missed weeks, then he wouldn't do it because
Yeah.
human nature is that you get away with what you can.
Mm.
And so there's always that kind of responsibility on you as
Mhm.
the leader
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and it reaps dividends. I've had historically lots of salespeople working for me who have done numbers with me, and then they get carried away and they go and work for somebody else because somebody's promised them loads of money, and then they fall flat on the face
Right.
because they haven't had that type of support. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm constantly kind of trying to get into the people that I'm working with. But I get pushback with, we haven't got time for this and we haven't got time for that.
Mhm.
In which case,
Yeah,
as
it's
far as
all
I'm concerned, they haven't got time to have a business. But
right. Yeah, it's kind of a bunch of false beliefs, right? Ultimately. But
yeah,
one of the other important parts of the show is giving you the opportunity to leave a question behind for the next guest. So if you could ask one question and leave it behind for them, what is the one thing you would ask that they must answer?
I think for me, it's all about what's the future for the MSP. So not so much the future of the industry because
Mm-hmm.
that's too broad, but if you look at the MSP community, then what we have right the way across is thousands of small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What's their future? Because if you add AI on top of it, I can make an argument that says almost 50% of what they do has disappeared. And so so where is it that they see themselves as time goes on, and what can they be doing to enhance their own businesses and the world around them?
Yeah. Awesome. And if people have had some light bulb moments through our conversation today, Paul, and they are interested in learning or discovering more, following you, where is the best place for them to engage with you or reach
The
out?
best place is invariably LinkedIn. Um, so, I mean, I often say if you put Paul Lloyd into LinkedIn and I'm not the top one on the list, I'd be very disappointed.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure how that translates around the rest of the world. Certainly in the UK, I'm there. So it's Paul Lloyd. My email address, you can drop me an email, is paul@cellularly.co.uk. Um, and if anybody's got any questions or anything, then just drop me a line or connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a DM. My approach to the whole thing is when I've got time, I'll answer all the questions. I'm not one of these people that want to put everybody on the clock straight away. I've got a lot of experience in lots of different areas of the industry, and I get a kick out of sharing it. Call it ego if you like. I suppose in some respects it's the only part of the ego that I get in the job anymore. When I had sales teams and did sales numbers, I was intolerable. But these days, you sort of you have to back off slightly. So my only ego trip is when I can actually help people and they go away and feel that they've got something worthwhile.
Yeah, I understand that completely. From running the sales side too, there ends up being nothing greater than the massive dump of dopamine, serotonin, all the other good brain chemicals.
You get, when you're a salesman, you get kicks out of doing your own deals.
Mm-hmm.
As a sales manager, sales director, as I say, at some point I had 70 odd salespeople working for me. You can't track everything, but you get then the kick out of seeing somebody else do their own deals.
Mm-hmm.
Doing what I do now, working with all these MSPs, they all win, and it's nothing to do with me.
Right.
They've done it all themselves, so I don't get that buzz. But what does give me a buzz? I mean, I enjoy speaking at conferences and such like, but it's just being able to say, have a look at this and have a look at that, and pointing people in the right direction. So I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate your time for being here on the show, Paul. And thank you again for the audience for tuning in to another episode of Learning and Taking Away the Nuggets, again, from the experience, even from outside the industry before you came into the MSP space. I think that's one of the things that I love doing most. It's certainly how I reverse engineered sales when I had to for MSPs. Is like, people have already solved these problems. Let's go steal from the other industries, bring it and adapt it to MSP, and then the code is cracked. So thank you again.